You want me to put that on my tudger?
This One's Wife. Scobie, a torrent of utter bollocks. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The improbably named plastic-faced lieutenant, Omid Scobie, is talking utter bollocks, or perhaps more accurately, writing utter bollocks. As you're about to find out, how can anybody believe what he has to write when he lies about himself? There's an actual interview which took place in the Times. The headline, Omid Scobie speaks out. Harry, this one's wife and the royals in crisis. Omid Scobie's new book, Bell End Game, rips into every member of the royal family, apart from a certain couple in California. That very sentence completely undermines the credibility of anything that he has to write because it demonstrates that it's biased. Were it the fact that this one's wife and Harry were blameless, then perhaps one could understand that other people would be criticised, but they are not. Take your pick from the various revisions of history, lies, and hypocrisies that this one's wife and Harry have engaged in. Swooping in like a ghoul at Uvalde, the ridiculousness of the car chase that wasn't actually a car chase. The lies that were told, the provable lies that were told in the Oprah Winfrey interview. The projection of suggesting that she was made to cry by Kate rather than it being the other way around. The ostracization of her father and her half-siblings. There is so much material to choose from. Those are just a handful of examples off the top of my head, and I'm sure you can think of many, many more. The bizarre circumstances surrounding the children, the interesting circumstances surrounding the birth, the various photographs of this one's wife during her supposed pregnancy, which raises more questions than answers, the fact that she is repeatedly engaged in behaviours which are inappropriate, talking about how wonderful it is being a mother to parents who are bereaved, turning up to read her shitty book, decked out in expensive clothing and jewellery to children who live in poverty. It's almost like shooting fish in a barrel with regard to the numerous examples that you can have, and therefore the fact that Scobie doesn't take aim at any of the things that the Sussexes have done shows just how blinded he is as a lieutenant, how biased the publication is, and how it's simply a propaganda tool. Laura Pullman is the individual that has spoken with Scobie. The House of Windsor is crumbling. The King is an unpopular stick in the mud. The Queen is a ruthless operator. The Prince of Wales is a power-hungry schemer. The Princess of Wales is a wet blanket who really didn't want to appear on Blue Peter. The Duchess of Sussex and her husband, all fine and dandy with a bright future before them. So I must ask Omid Scobie, the 42-year-old British author of Bell End Game, did this one's wife contribute to his book at all? No, and I'm not her friend, he says firmly. I didn't interview her for this book. Well, it might be the case, Omid, that you didn't interview her, but nobody is going to labour under the misapprehension that she has had no involvement in this book whatsoever. It stinks to high heaven. It shows that she has. For those with no Scooby about Scobie, he was a jobbing entertainment reporter in London who nobody much had heard of until 3 years ago, when he and the American journalist, now in hiding and never seen again as a consequence of her embarrassment and shame, Carolyn Durant, published Finding Freedom, a breathless account of Megxit. The access Scobie appeared to have had was the envy of many royal correspondents back in Britain. Initially, this one's wife claimed she had no involvement with Finding Freedom, which of course we now know is a lie. Later in November 2021, while in court taking on the Mail on Sunday for privacy invasion, the Duchess admitted that she had provided briefing notes for an aide ahead of his meeting with the authors, an unfortunate slip of memory. Finding Freedom topped the bestseller lists in both America and Britain. In revealing the depth of the divide that developed between William and Harry after this one's wife came on the scene, the divisiveness of the narcissist, which I've pointed out many times, it cemented Scobie in many people's eyes as this one's wife's cheerleader, crusader, and chum. These labels rankle the journalist, who mainly works for Harper's Bazaar and ABC News. Nevertheless, his perceived connection to this one's wife has brought him racist abuse, social media pylons, and death threats. I'm very aware that I'm quite disliked in Britain. The way anything about me is said is as if I'm just the absolute worst person, he tells me later. Tears appear in his eyes. And I feel genuinely sorry for him. I have mutual friends with this one's wife, and that definitely helps with getting information and breaking details, he says. But no, he's not on the Sussex payroll. Well, of course not. This one's wife needs to save the money for the PR puff pieces. Why on earth would you pay someone who is an evident lapdog, such as Scobie? He'll do it for free. Of course, he makes money out of what he publishes elsewhere, but he doesn't need to receive payment from the Sussexes. She's not going to pay him when he clearly trots up panting, saying, "What can I write for you?" No, he's not sleeping on the sofa at their mansion in Monty Shitshow. He's renting a home in the Hollywood Hills, a long way from his upbringing in Oxford. According to his sources in Bell Endgame, H&M, as their staff call them, are in a good place. We have to remember that this is a couple that, this is just my own opinion, seem to have bonded over their shared traumas, mirroring experiences and battles that they've faced together against others. In other words, their awful shared fantasy, which I've spoken about a long time ago. That kind of bond is much tougher to break than anything else. The bond is actually the manipulative hold of a narcissist and a victim who is completely mired in his own emotional thinking. The subtitle for Bell Endgame is Inside the Royal Family and the Monarchy's Fight for Survival. Running at nearly 400 pages, the book gives a withering assessment of how close the firm is to collapse. Bullshit. An argument built on Scobie's opinion and his conversations with former aides, courtiers, and friends of those in and around the family on both sides of the Atlantic. Most readers, though, will be here for the gossip and Machiavellian backstabbing. Scobie does not disappoint on that front. William is a hot-headed company man who is increasingly comfortable with the palace's dirty tricks and the courtiers who dream them up, smearing of the Prince of Wales there. Scobie claims it is William who, through his loyal aides and press relationships, has painted his younger brother as mentally fragile. No, isn't it the case that Harry himself has claimed to have been mentally fragile, talking about all of his vulnerabilities, the impact that his death of his mother has had upon him, the fact of the exposure that he had to all of that on the press, and how that's taken its toll on his mental health. That's why he talks about mental health and talks about the therapy that he's been in. This side of it that a lot of people don't know, or within our industry have known but chose not to report, is just how involved William has been in many of the things that have gone out about his own brother, Scobie claims. Queen Camilla, now finally tolerated by the public, reportedly rolls her eyes when subjects such as gender identity or veganism come up. Well, she's not the only one, believe me. A former aide is quoted, "Even gluten-free or dairy-free options on a restaurant menu irk her." Scobie claims, too, that when Piers Morgan called this one's wife Pinocchio Princess on X in 2021, after she had spoken out about feeling suicidal, Camilla quietly thanked him for defending the firm. Now, she's bound to do so, isn't she? Because Piers Morgan nullified a threat to control on her behalf. Meanwhile, the Princess of Wales, who was allegedly jokingly shivered on mention of this one's wife's name, and is understandably why she would do so, is portrayed as a woman terrified to do anything more than grinning photo ops. She reportedly had to be gently coaxed into appearing on Blue Peter in 2019. In the coverage of Kate, we infantilise her massively, so the bar is always lower. More smearing, Scobie tells me from his Hollywood pad. The small achievements, belittlement, that we've seen from the Princess of Wales wouldn't perhaps be noticed if it was from another member of the royal family, triangulation. But with Kate, it's like, wow. You can just hear these being the words of this one's wife, which he's parroting. Many Windsor watchers will raise an eyebrow at this depiction. Kate's public profile having risen sharply since Megxit, and not by accident, her campaigning around formative childhood years has been well received in many quarters. Part of the Wales' strategy now, Scobie says, is to take Harry and this one's wife on at their own game and focus on winning over the United States. More trips, more press. Then there's the Duke of York. The day before I speak with Scobie, Prince Andrew's fashion tycoon friend Peter Nygård is found guilty of 4 charges of sexual assault. See parts pass him. While Harry has been booted out of Frogmore Cottage, Andrew still rattles around Royal Lodge with his ex-wife. It's interesting what's considered the final blow to see you ostracised from the family. Reports are that Virginia Giuffre, who sued the prince in 2021, alleging that he sexually assaulted her when she was 17, is writing a memoir. There's always this lingering threat of more to come out, Scobie says. Triangulation. Andrew has always denied Giuffre's allegations. It's an interesting time for the family. Harry's phone hacking case against the Daily Mail has just been allowed to go to trial. The final series of The Crown is here, including a ghostly turn from Diana, and the King has turned 75. In Scobie's view, unless the royals rapidly change tack, the whole institution will shortly come skidding off its gilded wheels. Or rather, that's what this one's wife hopes, and Scobie has to parrot that. It's no coincidence, however, that members of the royal family's popularity is higher than ever, whereas that of the Sussexes, of course, is far lower. So quite where Scobie gets the view that the whole institution will come skidding off its gilded wheels, that just sounds like more of this one's wife's attempts at manifestation. We are at this pivotal moment in time where the future of the royal family as we know it is in crisis, he says. Really? Doesn't look like it from where I'm stood. That crisis being a lack of interest from young people. Well, it is the case that young people are less interested in the royal family, but there are some who still are. The polling points that out. An apathy, a growing Republican movement, questions over whether the family still upheld the morals and values of the crown. That's been mentioned for years, that the Queen did such a great job of. But when you look at the cast of characters, it has been questionable. Well, it certainly has with regard to those 2 that are in California. His assessment gets worse. For endless talks of modernisation, Royal Family Inc. is as resistant to change as ever. To stay relevant, the system, in an almost Trumpian twist, leans on patriotism, even jingoism, to shore up its purpose, he writes. It's punchy stuff. Rather than ever facing or confronting challenges of modern times, whether that is diversity or other social issues, the institution of the monarchy regularly turns away from that and relies on support for things of the past, as opposed to widening the following of the royal family, he says. Well, given the fact that the British royal family is one of the most well-known across the planet, and is still able to cause people to turn out in their thousands around the globe, it doesn't appear to be having any difficulties with regard to the following that it has. Another damaging assertion is the apparently growing chasm between the king and his eldest son, who is in heir mode. Prince William, 41, knows his father's reign is only transitional, Scobie writes, and is acting accordingly. The pair are out of sync, he says. It would have been nice to see them come together on certain projects, perhaps in the early years, to put on that united front, but they're all working in silos, Scobie says, sipping from his bottle of Fiji water. Most other commentators say William and Charles have become closer in recent years, a bond strengthened by Harry's departure. Therefore, it would appear that Scobie's view is at odds with what everybody else is saying, but that's no surprise, because he's there to be a divisive individual, to lob the hand grenades on behalf of his handler, this one's wife. The interview continues by talking about the king. The king, a flawed father and a philandering husband who destroyed the life of Princess Diana, takes a battering. According to Scobie, he demands that his shoelaces are ironed, and more seriously, isn't relishing the job that he's waited for his entire adult life. There's been a kind of realisation of what the role is compared to being the Prince of Wales, where there was a little bit more freedom and personality, Scobie says. Before Queen Elizabeth II died, Palisades reportedly suggested that Charles didn't have, in Scobie's word, the moxie or the vision for the family's next chapter. His fractured family hardly helps. It was reported that the king invited his youngest son to his 75th birthday celebrations at Clarence House earlier this month, but Harry chose to stay away. It's perpetuating this notion that everything is hunky-dory, Scobie says, rolling his eyes. I remember calling the Sussex rep on the day that story came out, and they were like, we haven't even heard a word. A few days after we speak, it is reported that Charles spoke to Harry and this one's wife on the phone on his birthday, breaking a long stalemate. Bell Endgame includes details of letters said to have been exchanged between Charles and this one's wife in the wake of the infamous 2021 interview with Oprah Winfrey, in which the Duchess said that there were concerns and conversations among the royals about the colour of her unborn son's skin. In the private letters, the identities of two people involved were revealed. Scobie writes, but legally can't name them. I don't know if either Charles or this one's wife saw completely eye to eye in the end, but there was at least a feeling that both had been heard. A source told him. Oh, right, okay. An understanding is said to have been reached that the Sussexes wouldn't raise this deeply damaging matter again, in either their Netflix docu-series, which came out last year, or in Harry's best-selling memoir, Spare, which was published in January. The fact that Charles engaged in a conversation about it shows a lot more of a willingness to take some of these issues on than Prince William, for example, who has completely avoided talking to his brother whatsoever, Scobie says. Well, the difference there, of course, is that Charles, as a narcissist himself, has a facade to manage and also needs to assert control and does so in the manner described. William, as a normal, simply doesn't need to assert control. He recognises the value of staying away from an individual who has been turned by his toxic wife and, of course, the problems caused by that toxic narcissistic wife. And in the circumstances, it means that William has decided, I'm not going to have anything to do with them. The most appropriate response to a narcissist and a victim who is in the sway of that narcissist. A painful episode in the book alleges that William ignored Harry's texts when the family were racing to reach Queen Elizabeth II in Balmoral in her final hours on September the 8th, 2022. See parts passim in relation to that. It was at the Sandringham Christmas family gathering last year that Princess Anne suggested to Charles that he take away Frogmore Cottage from his younger son, according to Scobie. Again, if that's true, it would not necessarily be a surprise as a consequence of the fact that Princess Anne is a normal and does not suffer fools gladly. At the same time, Prince Edward, sympathetic to his nephew, is said to have been encouraging Charles to speak properly to Harry. Fast forward to this year, and the chances of a cosy Christmas reconciliation between the brothers at least remain slim. Shortly after the release of Spare, Harry reportedly enlisted a mutual friend to try to orchestrate a conversation with William. It got nowhere. In Bell Endgame, Scobie quotes Harry talking to a friend. I'm ready to move on past it. Whether we get an apology or accountability, who knows? Who really cares at this point? See immediate parts passim in relation to that. He also alleges that Kate and her sister-in-law have had almost zero communication since late 2019. Entirely understandable. Meanwhile, this one's wife sends the king photos of his grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet 4 and 2. She and Harry also reportedly recorded a video of the children singing Happy Birthday for the king this month. Of course, whether that's to be believed is another matter, but it's all part of the facade management of this one's wife. Either it did happen, and therefore it's facade management based upon something that did occur, or it didn't, and it's pumped out as propaganda by the likes of Scobie for the purposes, again, of managing that facade. Scobie grew up in Oxford with his Scottish father, who runs a marketing company, his Iranian mother, who works in child welfare, and his younger brother, and dreamt of becoming a journalist. After leaving Cherwell, a state sixth form school in Oxford, he studied journalism at London College of Communication. His first job, writing celebrity news at Heat magazine, ended after he claims a boss called him a prick in emails. Aww. He calls it a toxic workplace. You can see why he's so well suited to spouting the tripe that comes from this one's wife. He moved to the American entertainment magazine Us Weekly and set up its London office. In 2011, he began reporting on the royals when William and Kate were still Wills and Kate. Before then, he had no personal interest in the royals at all whatsoever. Then, in 2016, this one's wife arrived. Scobie recalls that as a mixed-race royal reporter, he gravitated to her relationship with Harry as the most exciting story. I was going to work my damned hardness to make sure I was close to every single person in their lives and become someone that, at the very least, people at the palace feel they can come to when they need to correct a story. It's now that he brings up the abuse he receives from anti-this-one's-wife social media trolls, which often focus on his Iranian heritage. I've really struggled with it, to be honest, he says. I've definitely felt at times like I wanted to just disappear. Oh, Omid, please go ahead and do that. In a 2020 interview with The Times, he knocked 6 years off his age, thus showing that he's a liar. That was unfortunate and naive of me, he says. You live and learn. He does look suspiciously younger than 42. Has he had work done? People are obsessed with this, Scobie sighs. I've not been under the knife, not done anything crazy. I raise an eyebrow. He then admits he tried Botox many years ago and enjoys ultherapy, a non-surgical skin-tightening procedure. He is hopelessly single, but has his French bulldog, Yoshi, for company. Now, if you were to look at pictures of Omid Scobie, for instance, when he worked at Heat, and then shortly thereafter, if you were to say he's had no work done, I would be sending you to an optician. And the fact that he denies it here is another revision of history. And therefore, given that a man who has patently had some work done, and if he has, he's allowed to do so, there's no law against doing so, but that he feels that he can't admit to doing so, that he has to lie about it, and in the circumstances, that calls into question his bona fides in relation to anything that he reports. After all, if he can't be honest about the fact that he's clearly had work done, you can see it in the photographs. And at the end of the day, if you've had, many other people do, it's not a sin, it's nothing to be ashamed of, yet he feels that he can't admit to it. And thus, if he won't admit to that and tells a porky pie about it, you really have to question the legitimacy of anything else that he has to tell you. Scobie gets offers to appear on various reality TV shows but turns them all down. I become the joke that I think some people already want me to be or see me as. Scobie is the Sussex's unofficial biographer and is one of their keenest defenders. Earlier this month, the Sussexes flew from California to Las Vegas and back by Gulfstream jet for a Katy Perry concert. They were guests of the oil heir Michael Hurd. Here's the thing with private jets. I obviously don't fly in them myself. Hang on, I say. I've seen a recent Instagram photo where you look very much as though you're on a private jet. Okay, that was a private jet, but that was only going from LA to Palm Springs. It was very short. When I check Instagram again, the snap has vanished. So here is the man who claims that he's had no work done on his face, when you can see that he has. And then this is the man who says, I've never travelled on private jets, and then is immediately contradicted and shown a photograph that, or referred to a photograph that confirms that he did, and therefore he admits that he actually has flown on a private jet, but it was only a short trip, so that's okay then. And then thereafter, he goes away and removes the evidence. What a scurrilous individual he is. This one's wife has never publicly said a word about the environment or really attached herself to anything to do with it, Scobie says. It's nice of us to believe that she advocates for the environment. But maybe she doesn't care and that's okay too. So she's never publicly said a word about the environment, but Archwell, the Sussex's charitable foundation, made a pledge to become net zero by 2030. So I think that is something to do with the environment. Unfortunately for Scobie, he's so caught up in his mistress's lies, he's reducing his credibility with each word that comes out of his mouth. Pop concerts aside, Perry, Beyoncé times 2, Taylor Swift, the Duchess has laid low this year. Bell Endgame suggests that she's been actively avoiding further royal drama, a significant reason for skipping Charles's coronation in May. It's now set her up to launch businesses and more creative projects that no one can ever say that she's riding on the coattails of her royal connections because she has purposely tried to sever them. Yeah, like still using the title and the fact that the only reason people are interested in her is because she married a prince. One source in the book says she's working on something more accessible, something rooted in her love of details, curating, hosting, life's simple pleasures and family. A friend of this one's wife told Scobie that the former actress is busy working on creating something safe and timeless. Absolutely fascinating, I'm sure you'll agree. I still don't quite understand what that business project will be because, as I spoke to people while writing the book, it changed about 5 times, so we'll see, Scobie says. Her priority is apparently business and philanthropy, but since Netflix added Suits to its catalogue, the show that launched this one's wife's career has been a hit all over again. Scobie imagines there could be a cameo role for her in the coming spin-off, if she'd ever bite. What about Harry, who turns 40 next year? His focus, and this is what I was told by the team, is really building his work in the military space within the US, Scobie says vaguely. There's a real potential there to grow something really impactful. There's also his phone hacking case against the Daily Mail's publisher to keep him busy. The feeling for Harry is that he is one of the few people in the world that has the money to take this on. He also feels that having seen everything on the front lines and during 2 tours of Afghanistan, that this is a war that's not that scary, Scobie says. He's also probably, out of any public figure, treated the worst by the British press, so his feeling is that it can't get any worse. Spare, in which the fifth in line to the throne wrote about his frostbitten penis and losing his virginity in a field, did Harry a lot of good in the US because it really reminded people who he was. It's not all blue skies in California, though. The couple has become such a big talking point that they've almost become caricatures in the US as well, he says. Perhaps there is some apprehension from certain individuals to even consider working with them. What about the rumour being spread by a friend of the royal family that the Duke is so miserable that he regularly sleeps in a local hotel? I know a lot of people that know them, that are in their world or their space, and I've just never come across anything of the sort, he says, pointing out that the couple have a massive guest house at their disposal. If you want to spend a night away, you don't have to go as far as some janky hotel in Monteshitshow town centre. Janky is the opposite of swanky. Harry's British social circle back in Britain shrank when this one's wife appeared, as I've explained to you before, the isolation that occurs with the narcissist, and Scobie says it only continues to get smaller as some of those friends, who are also friends with Prince William, have picked their sides. He reportedly has a small group of pals in America. The narrative that this is some friendless loser that now is all alone and only has his wife to boss him around, it's make-believe cartoon at this point. Well, actually, Scobie, it's not. It's very much what happens to the victim of a narcissist. Before Scobie can scoot off to his personal training session, I want to know if he thinks the royal family will win their fight for survival. Could William be our final king? It would take a lot to dismantle the British royal family, he says. Hang on a second, earlier on he was saying it was just about to come off the rails. But could William be the last king as we know it? Absolutely. He believes that the Windsor's reduced tourist attraction is a genuine danger, but that such a fate can be avoided if they kick into gear. The book isn't hammering the final nail in the coffin, he says, smiling. It's just a reality check. He wishes. So, an interesting view from Omid Scobie that does nothing to dispel his status as being a cheerleader for the Sussexes. Let's have a quick dive below the line to see what reaction is to that. Jeremy Westhead. The firm doesn't seem to be in crisis at all at the moment. The new reign so settling in nicely. The next 2 generations of king are coming along nicely. This rather rings of desperation by the exiles, desperate to be remembered. Robert Greene. What utter nonsense. There is no crisis. The king and queen seem to be holding their own and, if anything, increasing their popularity. There is surely no doubt that the Princess of Wales has established herself as a really valuable member of the family, who's doing a great job with all her official engagements and the charities she supports so actively. Prince William keeps a relatively low profile, perhaps too low at times, but does not seem to be particularly unpopular for it. I'm no expert on any of this, but as a mere layman looking on, I really can't see any foundation for this biased hack's assertions on behalf of his clients. Claudia Lemire responds, the big problem this guy has, along with Harry and this one's wife, is that they think that social media outrage is the real world. See March adds, the only crisis is with Omid Scobie's eyebrows. Mary Willis, I rather think it is the Harry and this one's wife who are in crisis. Things have not gone as they hoped. I doubt the rest of the royal family are in crisis. Infuriated and saddened maybe, but simply getting on with their lives and the jobs they do. Margot Riley, what a parasite. Arturani, agenda, like having a book to sell. R. Adams, we are at this pivotal moment in time where the future of the royal family as we know it is in crisis. Has poor Mr. Scobie never heard of 1066, the War of the Roses, Charles I, James II, Duke of Monmouth, George IV, Queen Victoria in seclusion, Edward VII in court over gambling scandals and divorces, the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha problem of World War I, and the abdication of 1936? The royal family has had 1,000 far more dramatic, real pivotal moments, none of them manufactured by a C-list actress in Monty Shit Show, and survived them all. This man talks codswallop. James Gray. He had an affair with this one's wife's best acquaintance. Not sure she had friends. He's been dripped gossip since and financially exploited it. Basically, a poor man's Paul Burrell. What else has to be said below the line? Sure, even in this gentle interview, Scobie was caught out lying. Who can believe anything he says? Perhaps the Times' purpose in printing this was to let us see for ourselves what a waste of skin he is. Louise Stokes, what a nasty little man. A. Issa, tears appear in his eyes and I feel genuinely sorry for him. Does Mr. Scobie ever consider how much pain and anguish he causes to other people as he tries to destroy reputations on behalf of the notoriously vindictive and dishonest This One's Wife? Vanessa de Beer. Absolutely agree. However, who does not believe that This One's Wife gave him all the information for this book? She openly stated that she had suddenly found her long-forgotten diaries at Frogmore when they were packing up to leave. What's the bet that This One's Wife gave Scobie all these diaries with her nasty observations about her truth, and this grew into this diatribe of a book, spitting venom at everyone except themselves? The details are, again, way too much. How would he know what This One's Wife was the one to tell Harry to answer his phone as the Queen was dying? It has This One's Wife crawling out from every page. Her jealousy, envy, of Catherine is over the top. Sarah Clark seems mean about Kate in particular. She seems quite robust to me. I was taking part in sports, playing piano, leading on early years, and I doubt any friends of the royal family would be talking like this. Patricia Howell. Kate is a superb representative of the royal family. G. Fraser. Narcissistic, attention-seeking, waste of time. Stephen West. He seems to say he has no sources amongst the royals, so this book is presumably a mixture of third-hand hearsay and pure fiction. Well, nobody supporting Scobie or the Sussexes and seeing this for what it is, a publication that has been generated by This One's Wife, and, of course, that is done, as always, in the pursuit of the prime aims. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.